just like honey, sweet to taste on burning lips. Wanna lie beneath the water, feeling icy fingertips. Soothing nectar to my body, wash the image from my eyes. Dirty streets of hungry people, drink the water, dry your eyes. First one look at the reflections, listen to the music made. Drinking water's ease the mind, thoughts of you begin to fade.
Good evening, everybody. We haven't been on for 2 weeks, I suppose, maybe 3. It's Divided We Stand, October the 14th. It's a Saturday evening in Bridgeton, New Jersey. The great Bridgeton, New Jersey, as far as I'm concerned. If you're new to this channel, this is Divided We Stand. You can find this on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, we ask you to do so. We don't ask for anything. We are not a monetized channel. We don't choose to be monetized. We're not looking for any of your money or anything aside from some subscriptions, and that's about it. So if you find this channel interesting, you can obviously look at our archives. Please subscribe and share. Also, we have a Facebook group page, which is quite popular. We have around 1,400 members on that. You can find us on Facebook at the Divided We Stand group. It is a private group. We do that for a reason. When we had an open group, we had a lot of Trumpers infiltrate our page, and it was a mess. And I learned that from the previous group that I was in, that things get out of control. Gary Peacock posted an interesting bit about the David Pakman show. And when you have an open group, you're going to have certain subjects that are going to touch people certain ways. And that may happen tonight. In fact, I debated whether I would even come on tonight. David Price, my co-host, won't be here tonight. Dave is in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He's visiting his grandchildren. I haven't really spoken to Dave aside from these shows. I haven't spoken with Dave one-to-one on the telephone for months now. Not by choice, just the way it is. I'm hoping Dave's okay, but he is this week in Alabama, and he told me he can't make the show, and we'll do it next week. Dave's good for that. Dave's been doing this obviously for the last 3 years, and he's very important to me and to you, as I know. All right, tonight, usually our show delves into American politics, the goings-on between the lunatic fringe, in other words, the MAGA Republicans and the rest of us, which is why essentially we have Divided We Stand. We believe that there can be no negotiation, since it's basically untenable at this point with the Republican Party. And I think that word untenable relates to tonight's show. I don't have to tell any of you what has happened over the last week. And quite frankly, most of what you and I have seen, if you've been able to stomach it, has been unspeakable in itself. And as I said, I wasn't even sure that I was going to have a show tonight, because I don't like going on the air when I'm angry. And last week, I told Dave, there's no way I can do that. I mean, I know some of you actually prefer when I'm angry. Perhaps when I'm angry, it makes for perhaps a more entertaining show. But it doesn't really suit me well at all in a certain way. I mean, I don't mind being angry and doing a show, but I'm afraid of some of the things that I will say, and then I'll regret it later. So tonight I'm going to discuss what I consider some of the untenable things that have happened. Now, you all know that I'm a liberal. I do have some centrist views about the economy and such, but I'm a liberal, a progressive. I support the president, but I also support Bernie Sanders. I'm not a fan of Benjamin Netanyahu, and at some point I will have a night dedicated to ventilating against Benjamin Netanyahu. And he is an issue. But what happened this past week is almost unspeakable. You know, when the Russians came into Bucha, I think that's when it really lit a fuse in me. I mean, I was upset from day one with the Russian invasion on the 24th of February, 2 years ago. But seeing what happened in Bucha, my view of what was happening there had completely changed. I saw it as complete terrorism. To see what happened in Bucha, what happened to the Ukrainians there, which was ghastly. And of course, those things are still occurring. You'll remember the Ukrainians wrote on top of a roof, Дети, which means children in Russian. And yet the Republicans, yet the Russians, they're all the same, aren't they? The Russians still managed to bomb it. It's unspeakable. And that day changed me forever, thinking about Russia. There's no excuse for what happened in Bucha. I mean, it was bad enough that they were invading Ukraine, but what happened in Bucha was a mini Holocaust. It was unacceptable. There's no way anything on the Russian side could justify anything like that. And in my view, for us to turn our backs to what happened in Bucha would be inexcusable. We had to give 100% support to Ukraine, as we must do now. So last week it started with a post. I had heard about what had happened, I guess it was Saturday night, a week ago. And I saw a post, which I could not believe was real. And this was the least of what has happened. So this is what I saw first. If you have a problem with the volume, just tell me. Now those were turkey cages, and those were kidnapped Israeli children. I mean, I don't have to explain the inhumanity in it, but that somebody could laugh at that. And I remember when I posted it, some high school classmate, said, "What is that?" Because it was unbelievable to her what she was seeing. And I explained those were turkey cages. Those were Israeli children who were kidnapped, put in turkey cages, with somebody laughing. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, well, maybe this is something phony. And that was the least of it. And I'm sure you've all heard the horror stories. Babies machine gunned. Soldiers beheaded. People indiscriminately shot at a music festival. I mean, anybody can argue mistreatment of Palestinians in Gaza or in the West Bank. But there's nothing, as I'm saying, there's no such thing as black and white. I understand that. But this is something that Israelis, Jews don't do. Normal people don't do this. This is something out of the 7th century. This is Genghis Khan. And then for some to justify it. I remember a press conference with Blinken and somebody from, not from Al Jazeera, but one of the Arab news services said, they're pushing him on this idea that the Israeli news services were pushing out that children were beheaded, and there was no absolute fact in that yet, and that President Biden repeated it. And as Blinken said, we've seen so many horrific things. We've seen children machine gunned, and there may or may not be photos of beheaded children. But the very fact that the woman even is trying to make an issue of that, if somehow that's more important, whether, the children were beheaded or not, versus what's really important is just the outright barbaric actions of Hamas, and somehow trying to make an issue of that. And as the president said, there is no justification for terrorism. None. And to equivocate anything else to it, I think, as Steve Schmidt says, is coded for anti-Semitism. Just trying to find something. I really do believe anti-Semites, obviously, when they see things like that, they get a hard-on for those deaths. It's just the sickness. And we know from the Holocaust, we know from slavery, we know all the horrible things human beings have done. But it's the response, the outrage that you don't see all the time. Now, luckily, we saw that from President Biden. We saw it from many of the European leaders. And for the most part, in the United States, there is that support. But we do know the far left and the far right is kind of like a horseshoe where they meet. And there will be some who will justify machine gunning children. And you'll have to excuse me, I really do think some people enjoy that crap. I know there are people that are that diabolical. Just as I think that Kyle Rittenhouse enjoyed shooting those people in Wisconsin. He enjoyed it. It's just sickening. But I am really happy with the response from President Biden. He's been rewarded graciously by the Israelis. No president, and that includes Truman, has made a speech like that. And if he puts his words behind it, which apparently is doing, 2 aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean. And one can only hope that somehow there'll be 5 decent Republicans who will work with Hakeem Jeffries to get aid passed for Ukraine and Israel. Because otherwise, they're not going to get it. And that's why I say Trump's not going to care about Israel in the end. What Trump wants is chaos. So if he can have that chaos and not have a speaker, that's what it'll be. But meanwhile, the aid won't be there. And if they're attacked, then what's going to happen is that we're going to have to probably get involved, which makes it worse then. I don't think the Israelis want us to do their fighting. But if you have an attack from 2 or 3 borders, especially if it were Iran, you're going to need some help. But the Republican Party just goes to show you what can happen when you don't have a uniting of a country, as was evident in Israel, caught sleeping, so to speak. And there again will be a time that I'll come on and discuss that, because he's got something coming. I mean, Netanyahu, he's got something coming, and it'll be his own that goes after him. But right now, that's not the issue. What we had this past week was nothing less than a Holocaust. Nothing short of it. And you can't let it happen. You can't let Bucha happen, and you can't let Ashkelon happen. You can't let it happen. Now, how that's dealt with, that's extremely difficult, but it's got to be dealt with. And we don't have the USS Enterprise where you can pinpoint a photon beam at somebody and erase your trouble. But I do know this: we are in such a shit state. People talk about the climate collapse. This is before climate. This will do us in quickly. There are bad actors. There are Genghis Khans out there, and they have to be dealt with. "27 Americans are dead, and who knows how many are hostages." It's just not Israelis. But it's despicable. Now, there were people who supported Israel this week, and I thought Eric Adams from New York, I'll show you that speech, did a great job. I don't particularly appreciate the music in the background. I don't like that at all. But if you can get around that, we'll take a peek at this. I think we know it's political, but given the choice of not doing it and doing it, he did the right thing. And if he means it, which I assume he will, it will have helped. Let's check it out. If I can get this centered here. Right.
Not going to be long. I'm going to give you 4 words. This morning on my briefing, my special counsel, Lisa Zomberg, said something that I want us all to acknowledge. We've been through some tough time, New Yorkers. We're tough people. We saw the center of our trade collapse. We saw some of the horrific actions that played out on the stage of our city and our country. But she said something that hits me to my soul. She stated to our team, "We are not all right. We are not all right when we see young girls pulled from their home and dragged through the streets. We are not all right when we see grandmothers being pulled away from their homes and children shot in front of their families. We are not all right when right here in the city of New York you have those who celebrate at the same time when the devastation is taking place in our city. We are not all right when Hamas believes that they are fighting on behalf of something in their destructive, despicable action that carried out. We are not all right when we still have hostages who have not come home to their family. We are not all right. And we're not going to say we have a stiff upper lip and act like everything is fine. Everything is not fine. Israel has a right to defend himself, and that's the right that we know. Your fight is our fight. Your fight is our fight. And right here in New York, we have the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. This is the place that our voices must raise and cascade throughout the entire country. We will not be all right until every person responsible for this act is held accountable. And we don't have to pretend. And I want to thank my religious leaders throughout this city of all religious groups who reached out to us and clearly stated that they denounce the hatred and the anti-Semitism that was displayed on one of the holiest days of the year. This was intentional. This was bitter. This was nasty. This was something that shows Hamas must be disbanded and destroyed immediately. And so I say to you, I'm not here because I'm your mayor. I've been in Israel as the state senator. I protected the community of this city in general, but specifically the Jewish community as a police officer. I stood with you as borough president. And now I'm here today to say not only am I the chief executive of this city, but I'm your brother. I'm your brother. Your fight is my fight. That swastika not only displays the pain of anti-Semitism, it displays the pain of racism among African Americans. You marched with us with Dr. King. You stood with us with all the fights we have. And I'm saying we're going to stand with you and stay united together. And we don't have to be all right. We should be angry at what we saw. Thank you, Israel.
Yeah, I think that there's some things I wouldn't have had there. Obviously the music in the background. I use music in the background, but not for anything to stoke in terms of emotions, but just as a relaxing sound, as a background music. But I think it needed to be said. I think it also needs to be said that while, a lot of people on the far left see Hamas as an underdog, let's not forget that the South during the Civil War was considered an underdog, and they were wrong. The South was wrong. And Hamas is wrong. They are wrong. They are evil. They are butchers. And they have to be dealt with in whatever way they can get them and limit any type of harm to the innocent, which is going to be very, very difficult. Yes, Anthony, I am too. And that means you're a human being. How can you not see that? And again, there's nothing is black and white. Okay, this is not a diatribe against the Palestinian people. I'm talking about Hamas. Now, if there is a Palestinian who agrees with what Hamas did and wanted to machine gun babies, then I've got a problem with you, and I am fucking angry. But it seems to me that that's not the case. In fact, many Palestinians who live in Israel prefer living in Israel than living outside of Israel. But that's another show. And again, I'm not here to compare things, so to speak, and go into the Palestinian situation, but just to state that that is terror we saw here. You don't see that happening outright. You might see responses to things, but you don't see the outright terrorism, putting people in turkey cages, machine gunning babies, raping dead corpses, cutting the Achilles heel so the women can't get away after they rape them. That is inhuman. But yes, Anthony, when you tell me you're fucking angry, I know you're a human being and you care. I'm not asking you to pick a side. I just see that you look at that and you say, no. Wouldn't matter who it was. Like I said, you look at Bucha. I don't care if you have any grievances with Ukrainians or Ukraine, but if you see that, it is unacceptable. Bucha was unacceptable. And they must be supported. torture and wanton violence, terror, barbarism is completely unacceptable. There are even rules in war. But if you have a mentality from the 7th century and you're going to do something like that, don't expect the red carpet. All right. Let's look at Steve Schmidt. I think he had something important to say. If I can get to it. Yeah. Show a couple minutes of this. I'm not sure where I am on the code here. I mean, I can read off. I forget what he said, but it's probably not too much different what I said, to be honest with you. But he has clarity in what he says and in his voice, just generally in his voice.
De-escalation is an immoral proposition, and it is code for an anti-Semitism that posits that Jewish humanity is not worth defending, that the Jews exist at someone else's forbearance. The Jews will fight back. Israel will defend itself, and America will stand firm by her side, because the lessons of history are clear. Never again wasn't a slogan. It was the most essential moral lesson in human history. There can never be another Holocaust. And the United States of America must see to it that there will not. The mistakes of our past, where we turned a blind eye, where the ship the St. Louis returned to Europe, sending its passengers, many of them, to their death. Let's remember these shameful moments and chapters, and let's say in this country, never again. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so you never miss.
Yeah, if you're going to say it, you've certainly got to mean it. If you say never again, genocides, you've got to mean it. You've got to mean it. Now, about an hour ago, there were reports of more missiles indiscriminately shot into Tel Aviv. It's interesting, too, by the way. You may know, folks, I discuss the fact that I speak with Russians during the weekend, and some are pro, Putin, some aren't. A woman today, she's pro-Putin. And I forgot she had 2 children in Israel, and they're married to Israelis or something like that. And they had traveled to Israel, and she was just visibly distraught during our poetry readings today. And someone mentioned the fact that she has 2 children there, and then I realized all of a sudden, oh my God. And I look at her demeanor last week compared to this week, and she's always been upset about the Russian-Ukrainian thing, and she supports Russia, which is sad. But she's an older woman, and older, she's in her 70s, and she is a programmed result of the media that's around her. And I've had my arguments with her. But because her children are there, it hits home. And what happens to you, when you're in the ditch, when you're the one, or even worse, when it's someone you love is gone, and you realize just how much you miss that person. I mean, do you ever have dreams of people or pets who have died? It's tough to watch in a dream, you know what I mean? Because you realize, you think you have it right there, right? But then you realize just how much you miss that. I've had recurring dreams of pets that I've lost, my family who've gone, and there's this recurring idea that I forgot to take it out for a walk, or I didn't feed it, and I forgot to feed it the last 2 years, and I felt guilty. Meaning, I guess I've always felt there's maybe something more I could have done to save the pet. But the greater point is that when you lose something, when you have skin in the game, then you realize just how important it is. It's so much easier when you see it happening to somebody else. I mean, I don't have to tell you this, but sometimes you have to experience it. You have to feel the pain. And like I say with Anthony, he feels empathy. And I think that's where it has to be. You put yourself in the shoes of the others. And that's what I've done. I mean, I look at those children. It doesn't matter whether it's Bucha or Ashkelon. It doesn't matter. There's a sense of just absolute outrage. And I don't like myself when I get angry, because when I get angry, when I see unfairness to others, not just my family. I mean, I'm intelligent enough to understand that I'm you, you're me. We have different religions, lack of religion. We have different color skin, different color eyes, different hair, different gender. But what happens to you happens to me. And when I'm gone, there's going to be another me out there, another you when we're gone. And it does matter. It really does matter what happened in the past. Even though they're gone, you have to respect it. You have to respect what somebody went through. That's understanding. You can read something in a history book and say, well, this person went through this, or during the war, this happened. But there are bullets behind it. There's sweat behind it. There's violence, pain. And if you as a human being can understand that, and I'm talking about myself too. I mean, it took me to become an adult to say, okay, I get it now. It wasn't just a history lesson. Because again, behind the history are actual human beings suffering. And they're another me. And I was just lucky enough not to be the suffering. But that doesn't make me a hero because I somehow won in the game. I didn't win anything. If you're the one who survives the crash and the others die, you didn't win anything. Fate treated you well, but you didn't win anything. And you have to respect it. You have to respect what people went through. You have to have some decency. And that's what's being a human being. That you can look beyond yourself and the superficial. And I'm glad that I could do that. That's why I don't look for happiness per se. There's nothing to really rejoice about in this life as long as there are people who suffer. I mean, it's how Brothers Karamazov with Ivan Karamazov say, I can give you that there's a God. But what if there's just one person who suffers? One person in a box being tortured or whatever. Or one child. Is it all worth it? That 8 billion people could live and be happy for the sake of one who is tortured. And the answer is no. Yvonne was right. You better not be happy. You may be thankful that you were lucky enough not to go through something, but you damn well better remember that somebody paid the freight. This country was built on people paying the freight. Everything that you enjoy is a result of somebody who paid the freight, and you and I didn't. So at least have the decency and respect for those, because they did live, and they weren't ink in print. They were real people behind it, with real tears, who cry like you and feel sad like you and me. And again, I'm not here to give you a sermon. I'm just expressing my feelings, like Anthony's saying he's so goddamn angry. But this cruelty, this outright cruelty, mass executions, and to enjoy it, to laugh and justify it with some ridiculous grievances that have been held with you for so many years, and you're not even representing everybody. These aren't animals, folks. No, they aren't animals. They're monsters. Animals are too noble. They may kill to survive. They don't sit there and laugh at children in turkey cages. They don't behead people for enjoyment and shoot people indiscriminately. It's unacceptable. And it's got to be unacceptable for the rest of us. We can argue grievances. We've talked about the territorial imperatives. And that could apply here. But I'm not concerned about that tonight. It's just sickening. This is the year 2023. And we're doing no better than Genghis Khan. But I guess what really is the most important is, how are we going to respond to this? Just like, how are we going to respond to the Republicans? There's got to be skin in the game, folks. You can't roll them on the chessboard. They're attached to you, okay? There's got to be some sacrifice. You can't roll them out there, if you know what I mean. They're attached. That's the price you pay. And we may have to pay that price too, within our own country. And it certainly looks like we're going there. You can't be happy. You have to have a sobering view of what life is. There are moments of happiness. But more important than happiness is something called dignity, personal dignity. And that's got to survive. That's got to survive. And they're good people. And so I say that's why I think it was important that Eric Adams said what he said. Well, look, this wasn't going to be a long show tonight, folks. It was a sort of a ventilation. It was much better that I did this tonight than last Saturday night, because that would have been pure emotion. I needed this week just to be able to take this in my own way. I had to walk an hour and a half each day. I'm still jittery about this, and how this response will be handled. It's very, very difficult. You can't let this continue. And those terrorists, or any terrorists, whether it's in the Russians in Bucha, and the Ukrainians are doing a good thing. They're videotaping. They're doing everything they can, pictures, taking proper accounts, and that's what the Israelis are going to have to do too. Every video that they get, you got to put it out there, and then you got to charge people with war crimes. They have to be held responsible. You know, I'll say this as we leave. I didn't intend to bring this up. I guess it has to do with Zionism, not in the sense Zionism in its purest form. There's really an anti-religious movement within the Jewish people. Having a homeland, because no matter where you went, there was going to be anti-Semitism, bigotry. And they figured if you at least have a place where you can fight for it, you won't have it. But the real idea was behind Zionism is that you couldn't rely on God to save you, and that the people themselves were going to have to save themselves or die doing it. And that's a very difficult decision to make, whether you're a Zionist or whatever you are with your people. And I don't mean this to be an attack on religion, but there has to be an understanding. And this isn't where I'm not backing Zionism, this or that, but just the idea of, having a place to stay where you can fight for yourself. And that is that if you rely on some strings attached up there to defend you, that's not the way it works in the world. It comes from the ground up, not strings down. In that sense, they're right. You couldn't wait for your God or your Messiah to take it. You have got to do it for yourself, for your people, and your people have to do it. The people who know what's right have to do it. And that's the same for us. Right, Judy? And that's it. No more thoughts or prayers. We should probably take the Nike slogan, which is essentially to be or not to be. Just do it. Because nobody's going to do it for you. It won't come from the heavens. If you're religious, you're going to have to be the hands of God. Because it won't happen. Because it doesn't happen. The magic bullet's not there. You have to put the Superman suit on yourself. If you want to save the child, you've got to jump in the river. Or as Mario Savio said, if it becomes that odious, you got to put your back on the gears and let it grind. You got to say no more. But you have to do it. Because as far as we can know, we're the most powerful things in the universe. And we're not very powerful. But if we are righteous people and we are it, that means you and I have to put the Superman suit on. It's a metaphor, of course, but that's what has to happen. There's no other way, folks. Yeah, how is a response to it? Well, there are no easy choices. There are no easy choices. We know one thing, they can't do nothing. And my hope is they'll do the best they can. But you cannot de-escalate. These people are monsters. And the rest of the people will have to move. And luckily, it is small enough of a country that you can at least move southward. You can. It may not be easy, but do it. And there have been cases in other countries where those things have happened, that the people, they took the march. So, all right, listen. Thank you for showing up tonight. I usually talk American politics, and it sort of is American politics because there is that relationship, and we have American hostages, and they matter. Just like the one person matters, the one child. But last week was impossible. And I think perhaps maybe it's best that Dave is in Tennessee, in Alabama. It's a heavy subject, and I think this angle is probably good for me. I think it was probably bothered me more than pretty much anybody, I would think. I don't know. No, I can't even say that. It's so disgusting. It's just so disgusting. No, you can't move them that quickly, but it's only around 7 miles. They say it could take 7 hours to get people to the south. You get most of them. And if Hamas had been good and not held them there, they could get there faster. But unfortunately, Hamas uses the Palestinians as human shields, which is kind of funny because you don't see a lot of people attacking Hamas for that. Hamas is using them as human shields, and something has to be done. There's some things worse than death. All right. Good night, folks. Let's hope there are better days ahead, because we've seen a lot of bad days. And it's a lesson for me, for everybody. Yeah, Anthony, I won't either. But, hey, you know what? I watched the baseball game this past week. I got 3 hours that just took my mind a little bit in a different direction. Do what you got to do. Have a beer. Yeah. They can go south. The good thing is that the southern part is not as crowded as one would think. There are open areas, at least just momentarily. If you can stay there for a day or two. And it would be nice if Egypt would open the borders. The Sinai is pretty damn big. I just don't think that the Egyptians have no love for the Palestinians. They don't. They just don't. But none of the Arab countries have 23 of them? Or something like that. They all want Jews to go into the sea, let me tell you. Some more than others. That's why you've never seen a two-state solution, because they want no state of Israel. Zero. From the Peel... No, they didn't have an agreement. The Peel agreements, what is it called? The Peel agreements, and then 46 with the UN. They just weren't going to agree to it, no matter what. Even if it was 80% Palestinians, 20% the land to the Israelis, they weren't going to agree to it. But that's another story. Not for tonight. Yeah. Better to die with honor and live in shame. Yeah, that's like being able to go to bed at night, Anthony, with go to sleep. You're doing the right thing. You gotta do the right thing. be a good human being, and it's not easy. All right, good night, folks. Good night.